here's another thing that could be pitted in that competition. So imagine you had men who could confer benefit and who were incapable of inflicting cost, and men who could confer benefit but were capable of inflicting cost. I think you'd see winners on that side because of that free rider problem. And that ties into what we'll discuss in relationship to the dark triad, because there's some mystery about why women seem to be attracted to these so-called dark triad traits. And I would say that they're using them as insufficient markers for the ability to or the acquisition of status. So, and narcissists capitalize on that, right? Because a narcissist looks confident, and lots of confident people are competent, but some confident people aren't competent, but they can fool you.
Yes.
And then I think the other explanation is that if you had to choose between a benefit conferrer who could punish free riders and one who couldn't, you should pick the former.
One who
could deal with free riders, who could and would, had the capability to. And so you see this sort of thing. I really like the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast. I think they got it right. And so there's Gaston in that movie, and he's a narcissist, but he has physical prowess. Like, he can't understand why he's not the guy, but he's narcissistic. And then there's the Beast, who's a beast, but he's tameable. And so he can be a benefit conferrer, and he has the capacity to inflict cost.
Yes. Yeah. And the two are often correlated in nature. So, like, for example, if you have physical prowess or athletic ability, then you have both the ability to confer benefits, in the form of, say, protection or hunting skills, but also the ability to inflict costs by,
Okay, so let's talk about the dark triad then in relationship to agreeableness, because do you want to just tell everybody what the dark triad is first, so that we're all on the same page?
Yeah. So the dark triad, I think this was originally named by one of your Canadian psychology colleagues, Del Paula, at the UBC. And the dark triad originally was three triad, but it's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. So where narcissism is typically marked by a sense of grandiosity, a sense of entitlement. They think they're the most intelligent, the smartest, the most attractive, the most charming, the most skilled, etc. Or in the words of one of my former graduate students, they think they're hot, but they're not. And I think there's a way in which people do have the ability to assess whether that high self-esteem is warranted or not. Because we have even words in our language for things like arrogant, that kind of connote someone who is thinks that they're more beautiful or more intelligent or more capable than they actually are. So that's narcissism. But the entitlement is, I think, a critical component of narcissism, where they feel, I'm so great, I deserve a larger share of the pie, including the sexual pie, when we get to the issue of sexual conflict and sexual coercion. Machiavellianism, that stems from the Prince of, I can't remember how many hundreds of years ago that was written, but it's basically people who pursue an exploitative social strategy. So they are, when we were talking about reciprocity earlier, they will feign reciprocity, feign being good reciprocators, but then they will cheat. And so these are the liars, the cheaters.
Right. So if the patriarchy was based on exploitative power, then dark triad personality traits would be adaptively and practically useful and desirable, if that was the case.
Yeah, if that was the case.
Yes. But, yes. Okay. Now, and that gets complicated, because one of the things your research has indicated is that there is a manner in which women are attracted to people who manifest dark triad traits.
Yeah, I would add the qualifier that it tends to be younger women. So teenagers or women in their early 20s, women, as they mature and get more experience on the mating market, tend to be less attracted to these dark triad characters.
Okay, so here's a hypothesis. it's not that easy to distinguish the willingness to use casual power and control from competence when you're not very experienced. And so the dark triad types can feign status-related competence, and they can ensnare naive women.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And they also have some qualities that women genuinely do desire. So they tend to, like the narcissists, tend to put themselves at the center of attention. And one of the things we know about status hierarchies is that the attention structure is very important. That is, the high status people tend to be those to whom the most people pay the most attention. And so women are drawn. One anecdote, a female colleague of mine, very intelligent evolutionary psychologist, went to a conference and found herself very attracted to the organizer of the conference. And then 6 months later, she encountered him, and he was just a normal attendee at the conference, and she didn't find him very attractive. She wondered, what was I thinking? But what it was is he was at the center of the attention structure.
Well, the attention structure is an unbelievably reliable indicator of what's valuable, because we don't devote our visual attentive resources to anything that isn't of singular value in the environment. And so that's why precisely why we compete for attention. It's also an extremely valuable resource.
Absolutely. So, I mean, a valuable and limited resource. It's finite. And so really at every moment in time, we're making decisions about what to allocate our attention to.
I read a funny study once, you might be aware of this, where monkeys, I think they were green monkeys, but I'm not sure, were shown photographs of other members of their troop. And they gazed much longer at the high status individuals in the photographs. Yeah. So, and then you think about that too, there's something really interesting about that, because imagine that compulsion to attend to what acquired status, or let's say competent status, is accompanied in human beings by a profound instinct to imitate.
Right, that's right. Because, I mean, we are social learners. And one of the things that we try to do is to emulate those who have qualities that are associated with status. And that gets into, and those vary from group to group and subgroup to subgroup. And in the modern environment, we have this kind of a weird situation of a proliferation of status hierarchies, where you can be the top social influencer, where the only thing you have going for you is, a line of makeup or something like that, or nothing at all. I mean, Paris Hilton was like famous for being famous. And so she got a lot of attention, but there was no real benefit there. But we have if you play video games, for example, which I don't happen to, but there's status hierarchies within those. The most skilled video game player, the most skilled football player, rugby player, tennis player.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing, that we can create all these competence hierarchies, because what it means is that diverse talents have the opportunity to acquire the status that might also alternatively entice them to violence, let's say, because that is associated with status inequality. And so one of the solutions to status inequality is diverse games of competence, as diverse a range as possible.
Yeah, so, and that's definitely a good thing, because if there was just one status hierarchy, then that means status is inherently a relative, gauged by a relative metric. So if you're the number one, no one else can be the number one. But if you can be the best scholar, the best writer, the best World of Warcraft player, the best tennis player, these multiple status hierarchies give more people the opportunity to gain in status.
Right. Another argument against the patriarchy as a unitary idea, right? Well, which patriarchy do you mean? Do you mean like the evil coalition of plumbers, which is a joke I've made before? It's like, that's power, is it? Plumbers, really? No, they're not organized in terms of their success by which plumber is the meanest and the toughest. That's not how it works at all.
Right. And so, no. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that gets into the issue of there are large pools of men who are at the bottom of the status hierarchy, and who don't have the qualities that women desire. And so are they really oppressing women? I mean, there's this interesting there's an interesting photo that I think got captioned, but it's two very elegant women with designer handbags, and they're walking by a guy who's like fixing the tar in the street. He's a street worker fixing the tar, and as they walk by this guy who's groveling on the ground, they say, "Stop oppressing me."
Right.
So anyway.
Right. Well, I wanted to talk to you a bit more about the dark triad issue too, because there's a mystery in it, and I think it's one that corrupts psychology to some degree, research psychology. Yes.
Okay. So we didn't mention the third one.
Yes.
Which is the third element of the dark triad, which is psychopathy. And you probably have a deeper understanding of psychopathy than I do, but one of the hallmarks is a lack of empathy. That is, most normal humans have an empathy circuit that we feel compassion if someone gets hurt, or if a pet gets injured, or a child falls down and skins a knee. We feel a sense of compassion for the suffering of other people, but psychopaths don't. It's like they might laugh if someone gets hurt, and so that empathy circuit seems to be severed. And also, one of the hallmarks seems to be that they're not responsive to punishment. That they're more oriented toward reward, and so punishing them doesn't tend to change their behavior.
It isn't obvious that they have an empathy for their future selves. Right. So punishment's like, well, part of the reason that you react to punishment is because you don't want your future self to be punished again, but you have to care about that before that works.
Right. Yeah, that gets to the issue of the steepness of future discounting.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they grab for all the gusto right now and don't think about the future consequences.
So one of the big five personality traits that the dark triad is most associated with is agreeableness, low agreeableness, and I do think that research psychologists and psychologists in general have a kind of ethical bias in relationship to the agreeableness dimension, and of course women are higher in trait agreeableness than men.
Right.
Reliably, it's about half a standard deviation. It's one of the biggest sex differences, and it's associated with compassion and politeness in the work we've done anyways. And so that's empathy, at least to some degree. Now the question is, what is the ethical utility of lower agreeableness, right? Because you'd think, well, it would interfere possibly with sharing, right? Because if you're more compassionate, more empathic, you're going to feel the hunger of other people, and you'd be more motivated to care for them, let's say. But it's also possible that low agreeableness has something to do with, well, perhaps hunting prowess. That might be part of it, but it also might be part of the solution to the free rider problem. And so women are in a conundrum with agreeableness, right? Because they need a mate who's agreeable enough so they can bond with them and that will care for their children and that cares in general. But they need someone who's disagreeable enough so that they're capable, let's say, of dealing with free riders. And
right. So one way of saying that is agreeable with respect to them, but the potential for being disagreeable with respect to those others when they need to be punished or they need to ward off an attacker.
Right, and you could see that that's a real tight line to walk down. And part of what constrains agreeableness, let's say from a temperamental perspective, so if you're low in agreeableness, let's say, well, you're less empathic, you're more competitive, you're rougher, blunter, tougher, what would you say, at least with regards to the compassion you show to others. And so what helps modulate that? Well, some of that would be conscientiousness. And so in the dark triad types, you see low conscientiousness as well. Really low agreeable, high conscientious types are quite interesting because you can trust them because they'll do their duty, but they're very blunt and direct and harsh. And that can be helpful as well because they'll tell you unpleasant truths even if they hurt your feelings. So there's some utility in that. So you can imagine that agreeableness can be modified, let's say, by conscientiousness. So that takes the psychopathy edge off it, because low agreeableness and low conscientiousness, that's a rough combination.
Yes.
And so, because there's nothing constraining it. And so women are attracted to some degree to the lower agreeable types. And I think that accounts for the bad boy paradox that you described, at least in part. And maybe it takes further experience and wisdom on the part of judicious women to see where they can get the disagreeableness that's necessary, but it has to be hemmed in by something like, well, conscientiousness.
Right. Other personality traits like conscientiousness. Yeah. I mean, one other reason that I think that women are attracted to the dark triad, at least the younger women, is that they're often risk takers. So they will do things like motorcycle jumping or ski jumping, or take physical risks, speeding in their cars, or and so the kind of daredevil mentality, and women, at least younger women, find that exciting. But
I wonder if they confuse that with trait openness. Right, because the open types are going to experiment. They're going to try lots of different things, and that daredevil, I don't care, might be not easily distinguished from the capacity to engage in creative problem-solving pursuits. And perhaps with courage as well.
Yeah. So I think courage, and also one of the that people who take risks often in fact have the ability to afford those risks, if you will. So, for example, doing some dangerous athletic feat, if you're not an athletic person, you're going to fail at that. And so, in some sense, some of these daredevil behaviors, I think, are kind of cues that you have the ability to afford to take those risks. But these guys, these high dark triad guys, are absolutely disastrous as long-term mates. So that they might be exciting for sure. I mean, that's why I think that women, as they mature, stop being attracted to these guys, especially if they're looking for a long-term mate, because these are guys, they're the dark triad, they're more likely to cheat. They're more likely to seduce and abandon. They're more likely to engage in deceptive mating tactics. And so they tend to be big trouble when it comes to long-term mating.
Yeah, well, it also looks like they value themselves greatly. And, sometimes people value themselves greatly. And so they have high mate desirability in your terminology, or maybe some little corruption of your terminology. And again, I think the dark triad guys mimic that. It's like, I'm so good, I can afford to, distribute my sexual prowess wherever I see fit. And there's some of that happens as men rise in competence hierarchies as well. Well,
yes.
It happens with women when they rise in their hierarchy.